Okay, today's topic, styles and template creation. Let's start with the agenda. Today's topic will begin with getting started. Then we're gonna talk about creating styles, settings, pre-made objects, and we're gonna end with finishing up and a Q&A. Quick reminder about our upcoming webinars and events, productivity tools for Civil 3D. We're going to start with production tools tomorrow. It's going to be a very interesting webinar, so please go register. I'm going to be posting the links to all these events too in the chat section. So June 10, we have productivity tools for Civil 3D CAD managers, and July 7, we're going with productivity tools for surveyors. Also, a quick reminder about our courses. We have InfraWorks starting this week, and Civil 3D Fundamentals the first week of June, June 2nd. We still have some open spots, so please reach out to your rep. Okay, our service bundles. So these are the bundles that customers are inquiring a lot these days with the COVID situation, people working from home. First one is go live with BIM 360. So basically, BIM 360 is a BIM-centric platform that collaborates and connects your team with the data in one place. Right now, they have a trial version extended until June 30, so that gives us roughly 45 days to test the product with no cost. So please reach out if you want to know more about this opportunity. Also, Bluebeam. Bluebeam has a 90-day trial right now. For those who don't know what Bluebeam is PDF creation, editing, markup, and collaboration technology. But it is specific for our industry, for designs and construction workflows. Okay, let's get the party started. Matt, please, I'll hand over to you. Let's get this on.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
All right, welcome. My name is Matt Kohlberg, technical consultant with SolidCAD. I'm located on the West Coast. So this is the 5th in the series of best practices webinars. This one, of course, is going to be styles and templates. And let me start by just saying, it's not just about styles. Right? To be efficient with Civil 3D, yes, you do have to have the appropriate styles made, but there's more than that, and we'll get into that. So today, there's a lot of things I'm going to show you related to not really just making styles. I mean, I'm going to show you a little bit there too, but really setting up your template before you start making styles. There's things that you can do to make your life a lot easier and more efficient later on when you're making edits to it. So the agenda today, number 1, getting started. What can you do before creating your styles? Number 2, creating the styles themselves and some settings you can get. There's feature settings, there's command settings, there's pre-creating objects in your template, and then finally finishing up. Now, I'm going to take a poll first. Very first slide, I'm going to ask you a question. So in a minute here, let's get it set up. You're going to see a poll appear on your screen, so consider it for a while. And I would like you to answer as honestly as you can. So here's the poll. Which describes your Civil 3D template? Right? Did you make yours from scratch? And you can click more than one, by the way. Check all that apply. Did you make yours from scratch? Did we help you make it? Maybe you didn't make one at all. Maybe you work for the city of Burnaby or the city of Vaughan, and they have their own Civil 3D template. Or the bottom one is really only good for BC. We use the MMCD template. So MMCD, Master Municipal Construction Documents, it's an organization in BC, and they have a sort of province-wide standard that some users use. So if you have something like that in your province, go ahead and click that one, even if it's not MMCD. So far, 1/3 of you have voted. A lot are made from scratch. We've helped a couple people. I'll give you a few more seconds to finish up. Once everybody's responded, I'll close the poll and I'll share the numbers so you can see. All right, so we've got about 60% of you have voted. Give you 10 more seconds to get those who haven't voted. All right. Okay, very good. So I'll close the poll and I will show you the results. So there we are. 87% of you have made yours from scratch. 13 we helped with. 7 and 7 were developed by a city or MMCD or some similar thing. Very good. Thank you for that. Much appreciated. So our first page here, getting started. Well, what is a template, first of all? There's two main sections to a template, right? AutoCAD itself, before Civil 3D ever existed, AutoCAD has its own template. And what's in that template? All this stuff. Layers, annotation styles, layer filters, annotation scales. You may have blocks in your template. You might have blocks outside the drawing too. Line types, drawing settings, drawing units, page setups, print settings, paper space stuff. So that's all what you get in AutoCAD. Well, then what do we get in Civil 3D? Design units. Are we designing in feet or meters? Object layers, ambient settings, label styles, default settings. You might set a coordinate zone in your template. You've got abbreviations like PI, for point of intersection, or BC for beginning curve. Object styles like alignments and surfaces, table styles, command settings, and then I've got pipe networks in there. That's not a style, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. In fact, if you attended our pipes webinar a few weeks ago, I gave a lot of attention to that one. So that's what that's what a template is. What can you do to the drawing before you even start? Now, you don't have to do these, but these are some AutoCAD system variables that I like to set. Proxy graphics. If you don't know what that is, basically, if I have a Civil 3D file and I give it to somebody that doesn't have Civil 3D, just plain old AutoCAD, AutoCAD doesn't understand what a surface is supposed to look like. And so if I set proxy graphics to 1, then AutoCAD will understand it. But then you might say, well, Matt, you've got yours set to 0. Why? Well, it's going to increase the size and complexity of your drawing just a little bit. And so I'd rather leave this at 0 unless it's absolutely necessary to set it to 1. If I need to send my file to somebody with plain Jane AutoCAD, I'll save it with this value set to 1 instead. Model space, LT scale, that should be set to 1, not even for Civil 3D, that should be just for AutoCAD. Incremental save percent, we don't want that at all. Incremental save percent was released years ago. It's developed for the purpose of reducing save time. But for Civil 3D drawings, it can introduce some weirdness sometimes if you set that to anything other than 0. Purge the drawing of anything you don't need: line types, blocks, text styles, registered applications. And then your scale list. There are a lot of templates that I see have 20, 30 different scales that a lot of users don't actually need. So pare down your scale list so that you have the scales that you actually need. Maybe in Civil, I rarely work on anything 1 to 50 and lower. So 1 to 50, 1 to 100, maybe all the way up to 1 to 2,500. Maybe a 10 or 12 scales is enough for me. Maybe not for you, but for me it has been. All right, what else can we do before we ever start? So I'm going to switch over to Civil 3D for this one after I do a little bit of explanation. The way the Civil 3D styles hierarchy works is there's a top level of the hierarchy. I'll show you that in a second. And then there's multiple levels underneath the top level. And sometimes things get overridden at lower levels. That's what that's for. So let me show you. When you first start a template, actually, let me back up just a minute. Where do we really start? Your company probably already has an AutoCAD template. Now, you know what? You don't have to start with an out-of-the-box Civil 3D template or even a blank file. You know what? Just use your AutoCAD template. It has everything you already need. It's got layers, it's got your line types, it's got your text styles in it, maybe has blocks in it. Start there and then just start adding your Civil 3D stuff to it. It might be an idea to rename it. Civil 3D 2020 perhaps is a good name. Anyway, the style hierarchy. Here's our styles. We have settings at the top level, right? When I come in here, there's things like ambient settings. What's my default elevation precision, for example? My default is 3. But there's somewhere else in the drawing that's overriding it. And so from the beginning, I just want to clear all those overrides. I just click the button and that's going to clear any other setting in the entire drawing where that isn't 3 will be cleared. So this is a great place to start from. Now it's very possible that you want an elevation precision of 2 or 1 or 4 someplace else. But for now, we're just starting. So I want to make sure I start from a clean slate. I want to clear any overrides. Now, if you are starting with somebody else's Civil 3D file that has some content already, clearing this will be fraught with danger because it's very possible that they have explicitly overridden this on purpose someplace in the drawing. So clearing their explicit overrides is probably a bad thing. So I would make sure that when I do this, I do it at the very beginning. So that's some settings at the top of the hierarchy. Here's another one, surfaces. Right, when I go into surface settings, feature settings for the surface, I'm going to take a look at my default styles here. My default style when I make a surface in this drawing is called standard, but then somewhere else, lower down in the hierarchy, is an override. So when you're first creating your template, it's usually a good idea to clear all these overrides, knowing full well that later on, as you're developing your template, you're probably going to introduce these overrides, but you're going to do it where you want it. At this point, I want to clear everything just to make sure I start from a clean slate. Now, text styles. Of course, Civil 3D labels are built on top of AutoCAD text styles, right? What I've circled is just nothing to do with Civil 3D. There's just some AutoCAD text styles in there. You'll notice I've created 2 new AutoCAD text styles, C3D Aerial, C3D Aerial Bold. Civil 3D uses these, and the thing is, it ignores the height. If you've ever created a Civil 3D label style, you know that there's a height setting inside there. Civil 3D uses everything else from this dialog box. It uses the font, it uses the style. It doesn't use, actually, I crossed that out, all Civil 3D labels are annotative, but they're annotative in the way Civil 3D wants them. So in effect, it doesn't use the AutoCAD annotation settings, but it uses everything else. All these other settings that I'm circling are used within the Civil 3D label style. So the height doesn't matter. On a side note, I don't care if you use Arial or Times New Roman or Courier, but I'm partial to TrueType fonts. There's a lot of my customers who use Roman S or Simplex, right? The SHX type fonts that have been around AutoCAD since it started, really. There's a lot of good reasons to use TrueType fonts like Arial and Times New Roman and Courier, and there's not really any good reasons to use Roman S or Simplex. I'm going to throw a couple at you. When you make a PDF with TrueType fonts, your text is searchable. When you make a PDF with Roman S or Simplex, your text will not be searchable. If you need to print on paper, let's say, or even just the PDF, TrueType fonts like Arial and Times New Roman, they're much more forgiving in terms of line weight than Roman S or Simplex or other SHX fonts. I don't want to get into a whole SHX battle here, but basically, TrueType fonts are a better choice in terms of font with AutoCAD nowadays. It didn't used to be. When TrueType fonts first made it into AutoCAD, there were some performance issues, but those are gone now. So we have an AutoCAD text style that gets placed into a Civil 3D label style. What else? You know what? Just pick a standard. What do I mean by that? Well, if I'm having to do work for the province or a city or a municipality, it's very likely that they're going to have some drafting standard to which I must adhere. So if I'm working for the city of Burnaby, I have a particular drafting standard to adhere to. Calgary has another one. Winnipeg has another one. Each one of these governing bodies is going to require its own unique Civil 3D template. It's just a bunch of different layers and text styles and fonts and blocks and things. So you need a new template for every one of those governing bodies. So that's what I mean by choosing a standard. Then choose a version. Is it 2018? Is it 2014? Is it 2021? You probably already know that there is the occasional backwards compatibility issue with Civil 3D, right? Right now, between 2018 and 2021, it's all good. It's all just the 2018 format. I can create a template in 2021. It's still going to work in 2018, but not 2017 or not 2016. What about next year when 2022 comes out? Well, your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea. We don't know until it happens. So that's what I mean by choose a version. And then before you ever start, run the recover command, even on your own AutoCAD template, especially when you're moving up a version, going from 2018 to 2019 or 2014 to 2020. I always use the recover command on old files. You never know what it's going to find. If it finds some kind of corruption, you might as well catch it early, right? Styles. Just two things I'm going to talk about on this page. Number one is called object layers. Back to Civil 3D for a moment. When you create a line in AutoCAD, the line is going to be created on the current layer, and that's how AutoCAD works. Everybody knows this from AutoCAD. If you've used AutoCAD for 10 minutes, you pretty much understand how layers work. The problem with that is you're always having to decide what layer the thing goes on. You want to create a storm sewer for the city of Toronto. So you got to open the big book on your back shelf that says, okay, thou shalt draw proposed storm sewers on this layer. Maybe you've been doing it for a long time. You don't need that book anymore. But if you're new, you always have to refer to the documentation to figure out what layer stuff goes on. Well, with Civil 3D, in your template, there's an area called object layers. And all of the Civil 3D objects you'll find here. And then you tell it what layer to go on. It doesn't matter what the current layer is. So for example, alignments, currently it's on layer 0. I'm going to come in here and I'll just say, I don't know, cyano. That's not the right layer, but let's use it. My current layer is underscore manholes, but when I make an alignment, it will go on this layer. So Civil 3D not only is a design tool, but it's a drafting tool as well. And objects will just go on the proper layer. Now, some of these objects you may choose to use a modifier. So I'm going to use a prefix, and I'll choose star underscore. Right? I'm going to create an alignment right now, and we'll see what that looks like. I'm going to name the alignment main. Now look at my layer. So cyano was the base layer, and I specified a prefix with a star or asterisk in it. Well, that means use the object name. Because I named my alignment main, there's my layer, main underscore cyano. You can use a suffix or a prefix depending on how you want to organize your layers. So that's an option. That will allow you to place all your alignments on unique layers. It's the same base layer, but we have unique layers based on the alignment name. This works for some objects and it doesn't work for other objects. For example, please do not, for the love of God, section views. If you have 300 section views in your drawing, you will have 300 new layers if you choose a prefix or a suffix. That's not appropriate for this object. Alignments, sure. Surfaces, yeah. Section views, sections, no, not appropriate for those. So keep that in mind when you're creating your template. By the way, if you like the slide deck that I'm presenting, this one right here, in your GoToWebinar panel, there's a handouts area. So feel free, if you want this slide deck, to download it and use it at your leisure. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is layer settings for styles. I'm going to take these 4 things, right? I have 2 manholes and 2 alignments. I'll grab all 4 of them. I'm going to move them onto a red layer. Currently, they're on layer 0. Red layer. Okay. So these 2 are doing what I ask. Those 2 are not. What's going on? Think about your AutoCAD objects. These 2 things behaved just like your AutoCAD objects. These didn't. Why is that? Well, Civil 3D objects styles, if you understand how blocks work, you fully understand how styles work. We call this nested layers. All right, so what I'll do is I'll take this red alignment here. This is the one that behaves just like an AutoCAD object, and I'll edit its style. This is what the style looks like. You might say, oh, things shouldn't go on layer 0. Well, that's not what's happening. The object itself is on the manholes layer. It's just each subcomponent of the alignment is set to layer 0, just like a block would be, right? If you're developing a block, forget Civil 3D for now, AutoCAD block, manhole, right? When you're defining that block, most AutoCAD people put that circle on layer 0 before they define the block. Then they can put the block on a red layer, it becomes red, blue layer, it becomes blue. See, layer 0 is a special layer. Civil 3D styles and blocks, right? The components that make up both those things, if they're set to layer 0, when you change to some other layer, they will inherit the properties of that layer. Right? Again, I'll take these, I'll move them to some other layer that's a different color, yellow or purple perhaps. Right? So they are inheriting the properties of that layer simply because within the style, layer 0 is set. But this one isn't. Again, just like a block, this one doesn't have layer 0 inside. Excuse me. It has a specific layer. So the alignment itself is on a red layer, manholes. But the components that make up the alignment, lines, curves, spirals, all these components, those things are on this nested or embedded layer, which happens to be blue. So if I were to change C store manhole to red, then they would become red. So these components are inheriting a layer, but this one, C store manhole, not the layer that the thing resides on. If you've ever experienced problems using the AutoCAD isolate layer tool, you understand what I mean. Right? If I were to isolate this, everything would disappear. And you'd probably think it was a bug. Well, actually it's not. It's about how styles work. Because isolate layer command is going to isolate the manholes layer. Every other layer is going to be turned off, right? Well, that's normally great with AutoCAD entities, but this layer is going to be turned off. Therefore, that blue alignment it's going to appear to be disappeared. So even though the alignment layer, the manholes layer in this case, is still on, the layers that the subcomponents exist on, those are off. That's why layer isolate doesn't really work well with Civil 3D styles that have nested layers. Label styles. What I just showed you, right? There's the layer 0 in the alignment style, let's say. In this case, it's actually a surface style. But label styles behave exactly the same way. It's in a layer 0 is in a different place, but they behave exactly the same way. Which is best practice, right? This is a best practices webinar after all. Do I have to set layer 0 in the style, or can I use the nested layer? You know what? It depends. There is no best practice. Whatever works best for you. But I will give you some advice. Simple objects like alignments and feature lines usually lend themselves well to the layer 0 option. Complex objects like surfaces, profile views, and section views with just tons of components, layer 0 doesn't work at all for those. You really have to have nested layers for those. So there is no best practice. It really depends on the behavior that you need. And by the way, it's considered bad practice to set a color within a style. But again, it depends on your behavior. Why would people consider it bad practice? Well, think about it. This is a surface. It's set to color 200. If I xref this surface into some other file, there is no way that I'm going to change that component through the xref. It's going to be magenta or color 200 forever. So rather than that, if I have some embedded layer here, the color is set to by layer. Even when you xref, you still have the option to change the color later. And the last thing about this is the view direction, right? This is a surface style. Surfaces can be shown in, well, lots of different ways. They can be shown in plan. They can be shown in 3D. For example, here's the plan view. I see contours. I like to use the object viewer. When I flip into 3D, it's now showing me the tin lines. So in plan view, it shows me contours. In 3D, it shows me tin lines. And then like my slide, in section, it shows a magenta line. So when you're making your styles, don't forget to set them, configure them properly for all of the view directions. You can have plan, profile, section, model. Don't forget those. All right, so it is 30 minutes after we started. And what we usually do at this time is we go to Colin or Jay and see if there's any questions pending or any interesting things they want to bring up. Guys?
Yeah, Perry had a question. So bringing a template from version to version, what's the best practice for doing that? I just basically said, sorry?
Did you give him an answer?
Yeah, not a really quick one. I just said, well, usually it's just a matter of doing a save as and just making sure all the dependent files are there. But
Yep.
if you have the time, it's actually better to just start from scratch and import the stuff that you need just to clear out any lingering whatever that's hanging on to the file. But
yeah,
that was about it.
Yeah, there's no best practice there. Good one. My opinion, and it's just my opinion. I'd rather just do a save as, and not even really just a save as, recover. Recover is very important to go from an older version to a newer version, because recover is going to find something, some kind of corruption, and fixes it. In the I don't have 20 years experience in Civil 3D. It only started in 2005. So in my 15 years of Civil 3D, I've always just used save as and recover, and it's worked. I've never had an issue. But sometimes some people have. When you go to the discussion groups, there are strong opinions. Thou shalt start from scratch. But that depends. Your mileage may vary. Anything else?
I think that's about it.
Okay.
For now. Oh, actually, just sorry. One question popped up again. Please describe child override again. Thank you. I don't know if you have time for that, but
I'll be talking about that a bit later.
okay.
Yep, for sure.
That's
Thanks.
it then. Yep.
All right. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it.
Yep. No problem.
Speaking of child, this is child styles, but I'll make sure I talk about child overrides here too. So this is label styles. go ahead and create all the label styles you need, but it's really important to check every single one of them for its dragged state. Right, this one, the very top one, that's a spot elevation that was created exactly the way, let's say, we wanted it to. And then maybe you forgot to check the drag state. So you're creating a project and then you drag a label and then all of a sudden it looks like this. There's no ellipse, even the text is bigger, or maybe it's a different color even. So it's really important to check the drag state for every label style that you make. Right, here's that same style. Right, when I grab it, I think I'm done. I'm like, okay, I'm good. I need to check the drag state. Every label style, there it is. Okay, that's a problem. It's too big, it doesn't have the ellipse, whatever, there's all sorts of badness there. So it's really important to check all of your drag states when you're creating label styles. So that would be a spot elevation. I think that's called proposed. There's my drag state. And so normally by default, Civil 3D sets this at stacked text. Do you want stacked text or do you want as composed? Again, it's up to you how you want it to behave. But look at the text height. In the dragged state, my text height is 3 millimeters. That's why it's bigger than the other one. The other one's 2 millimeters. So stacked text does what you see. As composed, basically, however you configured that here in the layout tab, that's how it will look as a drag state. Just like that. Again, no best practice there. Sometimes you want it like this as composed, sometimes you want the drag state. But for me, that drag state was 3 millimeters, so I would have had to change it to 2. Which brings me back to the very beginning, right? There's a couple more things that I could have done in this template to make it easier on myself. This is one of them, okay? Edit label style defaults. Before I ever start creating any kind of label styles, I come here first and I make some decisions, right? When I create templates for my customers, I ask them a bunch of questions before I even start. One question is, what font do you use? And if they say Arial or Roman S or whatever, I'll create the AutoCAD text style for that font. And then I ask them, what text height do you use most often? They'll say something like 2 millimeters, 2.5, but then they'll say, well, sometimes I use 5 and sometimes I use 3. Okay, that's great, but which one do you use most often? If they say 2, I'll set 2 here. So that when I start creating label styles later, I have to do less work. If 2 millimeters is used for 95% of my labels, the last thing I want to do is, have this at the top of the hierarchy. If this is 3, every label style from now on I have to change it from 3 down to 2. So why not set it here 2 at the top of the hierarchy? And I only have to change 5% of the label styles I make to make it 3 or 4 or 5. Now drag state components, there's settings here too. Do I want them to default to as composed or stacked? And then there's that 3 millimeters that I didn't like. So I would set that to 2 here. So there's a bunch of things that you can do before you ever start to make your life easier. And by the way, I've got just a ton of child overrides here. Like I said in the beginning, it's a really great idea to reset these before you ever start. Again, it's less work later. Had I done that before I created this label style, that drag state, I wouldn't have had to switch it to 2. And by the way, you may not have noticed, but it's automatically switched from 3 to 2 automatically right now. By me changing one thing at the top level, by clearing that override, I've cleared this. Excuse me. Just to go on a little bit more about that, because somebody asked the question. There's a setting for that text height right here. My default label height I set to 2, right? I think components, right? 2. Default text height is 2. There are no overrides. Let's say when you go to make parcels, your parcel labels are pretty much all 5 millimeters. They're all, big. So I'm going to create a new parcel label style. And I want this one to be 5 millimeters. So remember, I have a setting of 2 at the top of the hierarchy. I am now lower in the hierarchy, and one style now is set to 5. I am overriding a setting higher in the hierarchy. And so when I go back to the top level and check my label style defaults, when I go to components, I now see that. That means that there's a style lower in the hierarchy that's overriding this setting. That's what child overrides are. Now, child styles are different. So you've probably seen child styles before. In this case, I have a spot elevation called connected that has 2 children essentially. So the way child styles work is you have the parent, which has pretty much all the settings you want. And then the children are set just ever so differently. All right, take a look at this. I have 3 label styles that I want exactly the same, right? The same circle, the same leader, the same text height, the same font. The only thing different is the precision. And so the way I made that happen, that's a spot elevation, I believe. So corrected is the name of the parent style. It's set up a certain way. Then I have 2 more styles as children underneath. And the only thing that's changed with the children is the elevation precision. Right? That one's set to 0.1, the other one's set to 0.3. Now, the beauty of this is if I want to make a wholesale change at the top level, right, the parent, I want to make them blue, for example. If I edit this one style and I want to make the elevation blue, it's going to change the color of all the children as well. If I did it right, that is. All right, what did I do? All right, let's try the ellipse. Yeah, that looks right. Oh, yeah, you know what? They are in a drag state, which has other settings. That's right. So what I'm going to do is I'll just reset these labels. There we go. Now what I should have done was change the drag state, but that's okay. So I changed the parent and all the children changed all at once. So that's the parent-child relationship is in terms of label styles. If all you need to do is you have to have 5, 6, 7, 10 different label styles, and the only thing different is the precision, it's a great use for children. One safety note, if I have another drawing open and I try to drag and drop these into this other drawing, thereby copying styles from one place to another, children don't go with the parent. So you typically have to drag them separately. I can drag a child first and the parent will go with it. But if I just drag connected to a new drawing, only connected is going to be copied. I will then have to drag the children next. So best practice, if you're trying to copy styles between drawings, grab the children, copy those because the parent will go with it. How's our time? Good. So a little bit about styles creation now. Label styles in particular have 3 different types of objects. You can embed a line in a label style, you can embed a piece of text in a label style, and you can embed a block in a label style. Right, there's the line settings on the left, there's the circle settings in the middle, and there's the text settings on the right. It's one label style with 3 different types of components. Most people understand this, but what you may not understand is there's a way to organize this that's good, and there's a way to organize it that's not as good. Now, I'm never going to say that you did something wrong. You know what? If you get a label style that does what you want, like both of these look very similar, kudos, right? You've done something good. Now, there's a way to edit a text style that makes your life easier later if you need to make changes. Okay, I'm going to focus on this one first. This is my good one, the one that I consider good. Right, that's yet another spot elevation. It's called fancy. I choose to make that line longer at this point. So I'm going to edit the label style. Right now it's 20 millimeters. I'm going to switch it to 25 and watch what happens when I click apply. Everything's still good. The circle moved over, the line got longer, the text moved over. Fantastic. So I'll edit the other one next. Same thing. I want the line to be 25 millimeters. And I'll click apply. Oh, not as good, right? The line lengthened, great, that's fine, but you know, the circle didn't go with it, and the text didn't go with it as well. So there's ways to develop these styles to make your life easier later. What's wrong with this one? And again, I'm not going to say it's wrong, it's not as efficient. The circle component has an X offset embedded, right? It's been placed at the feature center line. Basically, where that X is, that's where the circle was originally developed, but then I moved it over 20 millimeters to here. It's not actually attached to the line itself. Same thing with the text. The elevation component, same thing. This time it actually has X and Y components in it. Again, if it looks right, you know, you've done something good, but there's ways to make it better. So my circle, I don't want to anchor it to the X. I want to anchor it to the end of the line instead. And this way I don't need any kind of X or Y offset there. So pretty quick, that's a best practice for creating label styles. Sure, you can have multiple components within a label style, but it's very likely that one component is attached to another component as opposed to being attached to the X. Settings. So you've created all your styles and you're happy with them. Again, kudos, but there's more that you can do. Think about you and a project. You go ahead and create a new surface and you know what style should happen first. Maybe it's a style that looks like the one on the right. Typically with surfaces, excuse me, the first thing you need to do with the surface is make edits to it. So I almost always want to see contours and triangles and surface points. And you're going to find that maybe this style happens by accident. So every time you make a surface, you're always having to change it to the style called editing when you make the surface. For you, that's okay, because you know what style is supposed to happen first. But think about a new hire. They have no idea. They're brand new to your organization. And so when they're making surfaces, some style happens by default, and they're like, okay, well, I guess that's the style I'm supposed to use. So you have the control to tell Civil 3D which of the 5 surface styles to use in the beginning. So for example, I'm going to make a new surface here. Well, I'm going to start to at least. right? Check out what style is going to happen first. Slope banding. Well, that's not the one I want. The first thing I need to do with the surface is edit the tin. So I want the tin surface to happen first. So it's excellent that you do have all of the surface styles that you need, but it's better to set the appropriate one as the default, and I do that right here. These are called feature settings. Point features, surface features, grading feature, sample line feature. These are all features, and each feature has its own unique default settings. Now there's a lot of settings in here, right? You're gonna see things like general, time, coordinates. I'm not really worried about those. What I am thinking about are the 3 settings that have this icon. Those are the surface settings. And so default styles, there it is, slope banding. Don't like it. I want that one to happen first. Now when I go to make a surface, aha, the right style is happening at the right time. That's what we want. So your new hires don't have to learn quite as fast, right? They don't have to think as much. It's going to be more efficient for you too. I mean, you're going to use 3 or 4 seconds to change that every single time. Why not just set the appropriate style at the appropriate time? So what we want the right style to happen at the right time. It gets even better actually. So think about making a surface from scratch like this. I want the editing style to happen first. Well, there's other ways to make surfaces, right? Think of these as commands. Create surface from scratch, command. Create surface from DEM, command. Create surface from GIS data, create surface from grading, create surface from corridor, right? Think about a corridor surface. I don't want to see the tin lines for a corridor surface. If I'm gonna make a surface from a corridor, I probably just wanna see contours. But then you say, okay, Matt, well, there's only one setting here. When I go to the feature settings, there's only one default style. When you create a surface, it's gonna use editing. Yes, but at that level of the hierarchy. At the top of the surface hierarchy, there's commands for surfaces lower down. So where am I? Under surfaces, under commands. These are the commands we use to create surfaces. Create a crop surface, create a surface from scratch, create one from tin, from DEM, create a surface from a data reference. So for example, when I create a surface from, let's say, the DREF, right? You're gonna have a drawing that contains a surface. Then you're gonna have another drawing that you wanna reference that surface into, and you're probably gonna want that to be contours. Each one of these commands has its own command settings and defaults embedded therein. There's default styles again, but just for this command, right? When I'm creating a surface from a DREF, I don't want editing, I want contours. And look, that means that what I just did, I am now overriding a style higher in the hierarchy, right? At the top of the surfaces level, it says the editing style is default. But right here, at lower down in the hierarchy, for this particular command, I want to have this style. So back to the whole child hierarchy thing or child overrides. If I go back to the surfaces settings, you're going to see that down arrow that we saw 10 minutes ago. Yeah, at the top level, the default style is editing, but we now have this because I edited a style lower down in the hierarchy. So Civil 3D is a very, very powerful thing. I can create any number of styles. I can set one style, the one I'm going to use most often at the top of the hierarchy, but then each individual command, I can set its own unique defaults, creating surfaces from DEM or tin, or creating from reference. So there's a lot of settings. I know, it's pretty daunting for somebody new getting into styles. You know what? That's why I recommend, if you're going to create a template from scratch, elicit our help. We've done this a lot of times. I've probably, over the years, over 15 years of Civil 3D, I've probably helped, I don't know, 80 or 90 customers with their templates. I know what to set. I know when to set it. I know what to do to make things easy for you. So if you're having trouble, don't hesitate to call us, basically. Yeah, I know it sounds like a sales pitch, but it's true. A lot of times when a customer of mine is implementing Civil 3D for the first time, I know that they're going to need a few things. I know they need training. They know that too. I know they need the software. Of course, they know that too. I know that they're going to need a template developed. They may not know that. So I try to tell it to them. They're like, oh, okay, that sounds cool. But now, you know what? We're going to do it ourselves. Okay. I can't tell you how many times a customer has suggested, we're going to figure it out. We'll do it ourselves. We're smart people. And they are smart people, but they're busy. They want to get billable work done, right? I can create a template for somebody in a week. But someone who's busy, it might take months to do it because you're busy and you're losing a lot of productivity. So yeah, you can do it, but it's usually more efficient to help us, to get us to help you through it. All right, one more setting, and then we'll move on. What's your naming convention for alignments? I'm curious. Do you leave it, alignment 1, alignment 2, like Civil 3D likes to do, or surface 1, surface 2? And then what's your naming convention for corridors? Think about it for a second, right? I'm going to go into the alignment settings here. There's a setting for name format. Alignment naming template. There it is, alignment 1, alignment 2. You know what? For every alignment, we're always going to change the names of the alignments. But if your company has a naming format for alignments, you can actually prompt that for your user here. And I've got an example right there. So here's my naming format for my alignments. Maybe my company says, okay, for every alignment, you have to embed the project number and then the road name. So my naming template in my Civil 3D template, this template too many times, I just put this. So that prompts the user, like again, the new hire has no idea what your naming convention is for alignments, but when they create alignment and they see this, oh, project road name, makes them think, okay, I got to put the project number in here, and then I got to put the road name. So setting up your naming template, not just for alignments, but for everything else that you have a naming template for, put something like this in the naming template for the alignments. It'll prompt the user to enter the information suggested. Now for corridors, I almost always name my corridor the same as the alignment, at least, well, corridors sometimes have multiple baselines, but the first baseline. And so you can name your corridor using this field, first baseline. When you set up your corridor naming convention that way, it will name it the same as the alignment, which is almost, in my experience at least, it's almost always what I want to have happen. Okay. I know I have a couple other polls. All right. Before I move on, I'm going to ask you another question. Do you use child styles? Yes or no? Curious. I probably should have added one more, don't know or doesn't apply. All right. A third of you had voted so far. 75% say no, 25% say yes. Curious, do you use child styles, label styles, spot elevations, right? Like mine. I showed you the parent style with 2 decimals, and then the children, one had 3 decimals, one had 1 decimal. That way, right, you can change the parent color blue, and it affects all the children at the same time. All right, so about half of you have voted so far. I'll give you another few seconds. Jay, once I'm done this poll, I'm going to be stopping to see if there's any other questions. So get prepared, and in 1 minute, I'm going to call on you.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks. All right, 5 more seconds to vote. People are still chiming in here. We got 54% of you voted. The yeses are slowly catching up, but it's still about the same. All right, that's good. I'll close the poll. I'll share the results. So who uses child styles? 38% yes, 62% no. Again, there's no best practice here. If you need to use child styles, go ahead and do it. Hopefully after today, you'll maybe understand what they're for more, and maybe you'll implement them. Again, it doesn't matter. I don't care. If it makes sense to use a child style, go ahead. All right, I'll hide that poll. Jay, what do you got for me?
Okay, so one question from Holly is, can you set a label style to default to a drag state? And my answer was that if you look under the drag state component section of when you're editing label style defaults, that there should be a option under display to choose between stack text and composed.
Yep, that is true. I think what her question is, at least what I got from it was, for example, when you add a spot elevation. This is Holly. I know Holly, by the way. She's one of my good customers. And so what I think she's asking, and maybe Holly, you can respond to the questions, is, in this case, when I add a spot elevation, I want it, the second I add it, I want it to be dragged instead of having to, add the label style and then drag it after. I think what she's asking is, can it be immediately dragged without actually having to drag it? So the answer to that question is no. But with Jay, there's the default settings for drag state, and so yes, there's that. So that's what I took from it, at least.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. I should have been able to pick up on that too. Yeah. That's
So good. Yeah, no, it's when you add a label style, it will be in the default state, and you will have to drag it after. I can see where that could be handy sometimes. I want it to be dragged 2 meters up and 2 meters right by default, but we don't have that. Good question,
yeah,
Holly.
that would be really useful. Yeah.
I think
okay.
for this and for some other, I can see where that would be useful for sure. Anything else?
Yeah. Perry asked, is there any way to find out what or where the style child override is, as in which other style is doing it? And I said, I don't think there is a way, but I'll put that to you, Matt.
I'm not sure I 100% understand the question. Maybe if you can explain to me how you understand it a bit better.
Yeah, maybe Perry can confirm, but the way I understood it, is there a way to select the style and okay, there's a little marker that says some child is overriding it. Is there a way to find out which child style is overriding that?
Oh, I see. So is it maybe not a child style, but a setting?
Yeah, let's say we set overall settings for text to, I don't know, standard or something, and for
Right.
point label style defaults, it's set to annotative or something like that.
Okay. Yep,
yeah.
I fully understand now. On my screen, I've got this, right? So at the top level of my surfaces, there is some child setting that is overriding this. And I think what he's asking, you're probably right. Which child is doing the overriding? Not really, not that I can think of. The closest you can get to that is this, right? I right-click a style, and this is no good for settings, only styles themselves. Some styles you can purge and delete, some styles you can't. And so this style, I want to know where that style is being used so that I can purge it, let's say, and I can choose find references. And so this one says, okay, this style has 2 children and it's set as a default here. So that style is being used in 3 places. As far as the settings go, right up here under surfaces, and I've got a setting that's being overridden by a child. No, I can't think of any way that I can see how that could be helpful. Maybe it'd be nice if I had a right click option that says, you know, which setting is doing the overriding. No, I can't.
Yeah, it's, as far as I know, like you can select the style and you can find out what parent there is that might be setting a default, but I don't think the other way around there's anything on that.
Nope, exactly. So good question. Just don't have the answer to that one.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Jay.
That's it.
I will move on, and we'll talk in like 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. All right. We're actually getting close to finishing here. So at this point, you've decided on a standard. You've chosen a version. You've set a bunch of settings before you even start creating styles and label styles. Then you've created your styles. You've created 800 styles or 1,000 styles, however many styles you made. You've created them. You've set the appropriate default settings. You've set the command settings. You have a template that's humming like a top at this point, right? When you create an alignment by deref, the right style happens. When you create a surface from scratch, again, the right style happens. It's working fantastically. There's even more that you can do to make it even more efficient by pre-creating objects in your template, such as point groups. You can even pre-create a surface. You can create empty pipe networks. Because especially for pipe networks, there's a lot of decisions that go into pipe networks. Now, if you attended our pipes webinar a couple weeks ago, you would have heard about all these decisions. I'm going to go over it quicker today than I did a couple weeks ago. So here's my template. I have a couple of pipe networks already created for myself. And I think this is the one I want to edit. So here's the decisions that you have to make when you're making a pipe network. You have to choose structure plan styles and pipe plan styles. You have to choose the parts list. You have to choose a naming convention for your structures, right? And most of the users that I run into, they don't set a naming convention. You get structure 1, structure 2, structure 3. Well, that's no good for the city. They want storm 1 or D1 for drainage 1, or they have some other kind of naming convention for structures, right? Think about that new hire again. They don't know what styles to use when. They don't know what your naming convention is. So if you preset all this stuff up in your template by creating a blank pipe network, there's no pipes in it, it's blank. But all these decisions have been made for you already. Under profile, there's 3 styles we have to set. Under section, well, there's just 1 layer. But there's a lot of decisions that go into creating this pipe network. And so if the pipe network is already made for you, you don't have to come here, because this will create a whole brand new pipe network complete with all those decisions that have not been made. So my template looks like this. I have existing sand, proposed sand, existing storm, proposed storm, water maybe, pressure networks. I even use pressure networks for things like gas and cable TV. I want certain things to happen. So I pre-create all that stuff in my template, and all the layers just happen for me. Well, then how do you start drawing pipes then? Because if you can't do this, because that creates a brand new network, how do you create pipes and not use this tool? Simple. Find the network you want, right click, edit network. That will allow you to create pipes. Now, one caveat. Most of those decisions are made, but there are 2 decisions that can't be made in your template. I'll go back to network properties. Because for every new project, you're going to have a new surface and a new alignment. Okay, although I could pre-create these in my template, it's really not appropriate. So before you start creating pipes, you're going to need to set these if you need to. You don't always need to set these things, but quite often you do. So before you actually create pipes, come in here, set this up, hit OK. What about point groups? Well, whatever point groups that you want to use all the time, why bother recreating the wheel every time? Right? If I have a point group called banks that always shows top of bank, bottom of bank, just put it in your template. Sure, I don't have any points in here yet, but I can create the point group and I can define it by this. Right? The point group has already been defined. I want all the points whose raw description is top of bank, bottom of bank. And then tomorrow, when you go ahead and insert points, they will automatically become part of this point group. Same thing with my surface. I've got a point group here called surface. Its job is to filter out the points that do not belong in a surface model, right? Like monuments or hydrants or culverts. Those are inappropriate to use in most surface models. Now, you don't see monument or culvert or hydrant here. I have another description key convention that sort of supersedes all that stuff. Don't want to talk about that just yet, but suffice to say, it makes it easier for me. So if you want to know about this little trick, you're going to have to call us. So what do we do next, right? This is my template. I started a new project. It's now time to insert points, okay? Here we go. Points from file. And by the way, if you only ever use this point file format, PNEZD, why bother having those 24 other formats that just confuse things? I've erased all but 2 formats because I only ever use this one, right? Leave the formats in that you would normally use. You have to, again, you don't have to do this, but it makes it easier for some people. So insert point file, there it is. It's really only one choice. I'm not going to bother adding it to any point groups yet. I'll just hit OK. All right, there they are. Now, the point groups themselves need to be updated. So I'll right click here and I'll update. What does that mean? Well, see, because the point groups are already defined, when you bring the points in, Civil 3D is sort of in a state of flux. Updating point groups ensures that the points get filtered into the proper group at that time. So yes, the groups are created, but you do have to right click and update them. But 2 interesting things happened just now. A lot of the points look different, right? There's points here that look a certain way. Let's zoom in. All right, some points look red and some points look sort of yellowish with a larger X, right? That's because they're in 2 different point groups. Oh, and then by the way, the surface automatically got created for me. It's magic, right? Well, how did that happen? Well, guess what? I actually created a surface in my template as well called existing ground, because in my projects, I have surfaces called existing ground all the time. And into that existing ground surface, I added my surface point group. So not only did I create the point groups in my template, I made a surface and I added that point group to that surface. So it's just ready. The second I bring points in and update my point groups, surface automatically rebuilds. So all these little things, efficiency improvements, add up at the end of your project, right? If the right style happens at the right time, and all this stuff just happens, the right styles, even surfaces get created, pipe networks are already there, it just makes for a more efficient project. Are you going to save days? Maybe, over the life of the project. What else can you pre-create? Well, these things are not really part of your template, although I guess they could be. You could put an assembly complete with a bunch of sub-assemblies in your template if you wanted to. Usually those go in a tool palette. So though not part of your template, it's still part of your whole Civil 3D system. Assemblies, maybe your forestry, and you only ever use 1 or 2 cross sections or assemblies for your corridors. Put those on a tool palette and share them with your team. That way you're not recreating the wheel again. What about out of the box sub-assemblies, right? There's a curb. Oops. Curb out of the box looks like this, sort of. Maybe that's not the correct shape for you. Maybe you want a 300 millimeter gutter pan instead of 400. Well, again, you can create a tool palette, copy and paste the out of the box curb into your custom tool palette, and then change the defaults. Again, we want to avoid recreating that wheel. And by the way, you can give it a different name. Instead of calling it, urban curb and gutter, like Civil 3D calls it, you can call it MMCD curb or Ontario curb, whatever the governing body there is. Saving you keystrokes, that's the point. Custom part catalogs, again, it's not part of your template, but it's part of your whole Civil 3D system. Any custom parts you need, any custom properties you need, create custom catalogs, share them with your team. You're reducing your workload. If you're using automated line work in the survey database, there's ways to customize that as well. Again, share them with your team so everybody gets all the same settings. It's reducing keystrokes. It's allowing us not to recreate that wheel every time. All these little things add up at the end of your project. Okay, so now you have something that's really, really efficient. You have all those objects pre-created in your template, like point groups, maybe in surfaces. You have your catalogs, but you're left with a bunch of stuff in a drawing because you're doing testing, right? You got to have a drawing in order to do testing. You're going to insert points. You're going to insert alignments. You're going to make parcels. You're going to make profiles and corridors and pipes. And basically, while you're creating your template, you're going to create every single object that you have a style for, and you're going to test every single one of your styles. In the drag state for label styles and the default state, you're going to create pipe networks, corridors, assemblies. You need to test everything. So you're going to have a drawing with a ton of stuff in it. This has to be our template. So then really just a matter of erasing them, right? I don't need this alignment anymore because it's used for testing. I don't need my points. I don't need my surface. So really it's just a matter of erasing things. But here's what not to do, okay? This is your safety tip of the day. A lot of people might be inclined to type erase and then type ALL. You may or may not know this AutoCAD option. When you type ALL, all, when AutoCAD is asking you to select objects, it will erase or select everything in the entire drawing, which sounds like a great idea. Everything's gone. All right, thumbs up. Well, guess what? I used to have pipe networks in my drawing. Even though they were empty, I no longer have those pipe networks anymore. Interestingly, I don't know why this is, but even though your pipe networks are empty, they are still selectable when you type ALL. So, safety tip of the day is do not erase all in your template. See, I undid. There's my networks. Well, just the one. I only had one in this drawing. So, safety tip, do not erase all. Use the erase command, but just by window. Now, everything should be gone. But sometimes there's little things floating around that you can't see. And that's when I start using the quick select tool. Because the quick select tells me which objects remain. There are none, which is great, but I still have my pipe network. So I'm a happy camper. I've erased everything that I wanted to erase. My pipe network is still there. I'm good to go. Okay, so after you erase, you might think about, okay, well, now it's time to run the save as command. And instead of DWG, you want to use DWT. And that is good, but not yet. There's a couple more things you want to do. Watch what happens when I make an alignment. What time is it? 10 minutes left. All right, alignment, new. Okay. Look at my alignment name. It's alignment 5. You know, maybe that's okay because you're going to rename this alignment anyway, but why did it start at 5? I erased all the other alignments. Why is it starting at 5 now? Well, Civil 3D has counters. Every time you make an alignment, it will increment that counter. And so part of my process when I'm finishing up somebody's template is to reset the counters. So I'll go back into alignment settings, find my naming format. There, see, my counter is now 6. My next alignment is going to be number 6. So I have to reset the counter now. There. Now when I make an alignment, it will be number 1. There it is. But not just for alignments, everything in Civil 3D, surfaces, corridors, pipes. It's going to take a little while. There's a lot of settings to go through, but you want, for me at least, if someone's paying me to do a template for them, I want it to be the best it can be. I don't want the question, why does it start at number 5 for alignments? So I'm going to spend the time to go in and reset all those counters for surfaces, points, alignments, pipes, everything, corridors. It just makes it a cleaner product at the end. Then run the purge command. Get rid of everything that you don't need. If there's any unnamed blocks, if there's any layers, any text styles, any old line types, get rid of those. By the way, 2020 AutoCAD makes the purge a lot nicer if you haven't discovered that yet. Run the recover command on it again at the very end. Make sure your template is as clean and as error-free as possible. Then and only then, you can save it as a DWT, your actual template. So what did we do today? Talked about some things you can do before you even get started to make your life easy. Talked about creating object styles and label styles. Talked about setting defaults, not just for objects, but for different commands within an object, like surface default style versus, I want to create a surface from a deref. Those can have different settings. Which objects can be pre-created in your template, but not only those, other objects that are part of the whole system, like assemblies, right? Or survey figure defaults. And then we talked about what to do before you're finished, resetting the counters, erasing objects without erasing all. And so hopefully you got a lot out of today. Thank you very much for attending. Let's talk to Jay to see if there's any more outstanding, interesting questions that we can answer, and then Saeed will take over after that.
No new questions.
No new questions. Okay, that's fine. What generally happens is, you'll stew on this for a day or two, and feel free to email me or Jay or anyone else involved here, or just go to the SolidCAD tech support line and ask a question there too. We're more than happy to answer. All right, Saeed, you got some closing slides?
Yes, yes, I will. Let me just switch screens for a second here.
There you are.
Yeah, I think it's relevant to at least go over briefly on our Scene Manager suite of tools. So these tools are specifically to manage your styles and your templates. The Scene Manager has 4 different tools. First is the line type manager, which basically help you create and edit AutoCAD line types with a graphical interface instead of the tedious link files. There's also the layer boss that will help us speed up the layer management process by creating and syncing templates and layers from an Excel spreadsheet. Then we have the third one is the survey template manager. With this tool, you could improve your template management by creating and syncing description key sets and figure prefix database from any Excel spreadsheet as well. And finally, the template tracker. So this will help you with your template maintenance. So you will be able to track and replace embedded layer, text, dimension, and little styles in any drawing or template. I know that we don't have a lot of time, but on June 10, we're gonna have a webinar and we're gonna go over all these tools in details with live demos. So if you have time, please go to our event section. It's on the chat. Click on this event and register. It's gonna be very interesting. And with that, our webinar is done. I'd like to thank Matt, Jay, and Colin for this amazing session, and thank you all for joining us. I hope you have learned something good.
Thanks. One of us, I'll stick around for a few minutes after we sign off in case there's any other questions. Jay and Colin, feel free to stick around, or you can get lost. I'll stick around until until the end if there's any other questions. But yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks to Jay and Colin for answering the questions. Thanks to Saeed. Have a good rest of your week.